Hi and welcome everybody to this new lesson, World Situation Before the Second World War. To understand why did the Second World War happen, we have to know how was the world situation after the Great War. After the enormous pain and destruction suffered in the Great War, especially in the European countries, the United States of America began a period of commercial and economic prosperity. They became the world's leading economic power. And how did the USA reach to this enormous growth? Well, it was possible thanks to the use of these new energy sources like electricity and oil, which replaced the coal, the new forms of mass media, radio, telegraph, telephone, and the introduction of production line system known as Taylorism and Fordism, which increased productivity and reduced cost. The use of advertising campaigns prepared the way for mass consumption. Middle class could now afford all kinds of electrical and modern services that were before only available to the wealthy. This euphoria also affected their lifestyle. There was also a rise of new form of mass entertainment like cinema, cabarets, clothes fashion, and new musical trends like Charleston. You can have a look there to the video to see how Charleston was like. On the other hand, Europe had to rebuild its economy. Agriculture and industry were in a terrible state, and there were great numbers of unemployment. You can see there on the left Germany's debts with other European countries. For example, 52% of their debt had to be paid to France, 22% to the UK, or 10% to Italy. And also on the right, you have the debts that some European countries had to pay to the United States of America. In the case of France, for example, more than 4,000 million of dollars, the UK 4,600 million of dollars, okay, and other countries more than 2,800 millions of dollars. Germany's situation was particularly serious because the country was unable to pay the war compensation. So German people suffer massive inflation. It means that the prices rise very quickly. The Deutsche Mark lost much of its value. There was a huge rise of unemployment and a decline in Germans' standards of living. In 1929, the collapse of the New York Stock Exchange took place, and it was caused due to two reasons. The first one was overproduction. Production grew faster than demand. It meant that companies were accumulating too many stocks. For example, imagine a car company. There can be making 2,000 cars per month, although they only sold 1,000. They thought that they were going to sell them, but it wasn't true. So they had 1,000 cars there without selling, and that was money invested there. Money that did produce nothing at all. The second reason was speculation. Many Americans invested in the stock market, so shares increased, but it was all a speculative bubble because there was little industry growth. On the 24th of October 1929, which was called the Black Thursday, the New York Stock Exchange came under pressure because everybody wanted to sell their shares, but nobody wanted to buy them. This led to the stock market crash, which produced a banking crisis. Does it sound familiar to you? This crisis spread quickly to all areas of the economy. Unemployment increased and consumption fell. The crisis spread from the USA to the rest of the world, and all the governments introduced measures to reduce its effects and to help the economy to recover. In the case of the United States of America, Franklin Roosevelt introduced his New Deal, where he proposed a state intervention by creating public companies, introducing stricter banking controls, or reducing working week hours. John Keynes defended this idea of state intervention as the best way to escape from the crisis. On the other hand, European countries adopted different measures. For example, Great Britain established protectionism, and France that adopted deflection as a measure against the crisis. For Italy, the human and economic after effects of the Great War were enormous. Many dead, the nation's industry was destroyed, they had big debt, the inflation was rising, and they were really very disappointed with the peace agreements. All this generated great political instability and acute social tensions. It was during this time that Benito Mussolini appeared on the political scene in Italy. In 1919, he formed these black shirts, who were like paramilitary groups that carry out violent attacks. In 1921, these black shirts became the National Fascist Party, and this political party had the support of the bourgeoisie, the big agricultural and industrial owners, and also it was tolerated by the Catholic Church and the king. In the 1922 elections, the Fascist Party only gained 22 seats out of 500, and as a show of strength, Mussolini organized a march on Rome with 300,000 black shirts. Under pressure, the king finally appointed Mussolini as head of the government in October. So at the beginning, once in the government, Mussolini maintained the pretense that it was a parliamentary regime, but after the 1924 elections, he established an authoritarian regime. The state established great control over society, especially through the media. The party also controlled the economy. As in the case of Italy, the war debt and the strict peace conditions resulted in a severe economic crisis and poverty and unemployment. Adolf Hitler joined the National Socialist German Workers' Party, and he soon became the party's leader. Hitler's basic philosophy was expressed in his book Mein Kampf, which he wrote while he was in jail, and where he expressed that he didn't believe in democracy or Bolshevism, that he believed in the superiority of the Aryan race and the need to unite all German-speaking people within a great empire. To gain the trust of the workers, Hitler used demagoguery. He promised unemployment for everyone, higher wages, and he also claimed that it was the youth, the communists, and the Democrats who were responsible for Germany's economic crisis. The Nazi Party also contained paramilitary organizations, the assault troops, and the protective sections. After the 1929 crash, the social unrest encouraged extremist parties, doesn't it sound familiar to you again? And then the bankrupt middle classes and some unemployed workers were attracted by the promises of the Nazi Party. In the 1932 elections, the Nazi Party won, and President Hindenburg had to appoint Hitler as a Chancellor of Germany. Hitler then called new elections in March of 1933 with the hope of gaining a parliamentary majority. In the middle of the electoral campaign, there was a fire in the parliament, and this gave Hitler a pretext to declare a state of emergency, persecute his opponents, and a cutback on civil liberties. In these volatile situations, the election took place, and the Nazi Party obtained 44% of the votes. In 1934, following the death of Hindenburg, Hitler was proclaimed Führer and Chancellor of the Third Reich. What kind of society did the Nazis wanted to create? In 1934, the Nazis established a dictatorship in Germany. They also closed parliament and abolished elections. And in 1933, the first concentration camps were created where opponents and enemies of the Reich were imprisoned. The Nazis wanted to create a German society based on the superiority of the Aryan race and the ideology of the National Socialism. Women's role in society was limited to the three Ks: Kinder, Kirche, Kirche. children, church, and kitchen. There you have also in number 3 the video about this ideology that the Nazis have that you can have a look at. So after watching this video and the other videos that you have there for your use, what is what you have to do? You have to do a computer graphics explaining the main characteristics of the 4 periods that were decisive for the World War II. So we are talking about the Roaring Twenties, the 1929 crisis, the fascism, and the Nazism.